So basically, all the lore starts in the 1800s. There was this guy, but he wasn't just any guy. His name was Edmund. You see, Edmund was a very ambitious guy. He wanted to create some really cool stuff. But of course, to create cool stuff, you gotta know how. So our boy Edmund went on trying to figure out, how am I gonna do this? That was until the universe pulled up and was like... But let's backtrack a little bit and talk about why Edmund wants to make this super cool stuff. So basically, Edmund has this brother, and his name is Agnes. They basically live in this giant, kind of dystopian wasteland. Edmund and Agnes had this sort of job at the junkyard where they would pick up old machinery and stuff, fix it up, and then sell it. It is here at one of these junkyards that Edmund meets this very interesting guy named Xavier. Edmund can tell that this mysterious Xavier guy clearly is not a human. I'm pretty sure he was some type of spirit or something, but I don't know. So Xavier goes on to tell Edmund about all this cool stuff, like time machines. But these time machines were powered by essence, which essentially means human souls or parts of human souls. The coolest thing about these time machines is that they couldn't just travel time. They could travel in between dimensions and universes. But let's talk a little bit more about essence for now. So basically, this essence, or soul energy, as some people like to call it, can go into things to make them more lively. This can be classified as possession. This possession can create a sort of immortality. You may be thinking, well, what happens whenever you wear out the body? It's as simple as this. You just have to find a new vessel to possess. Okay, but back to talking about Edmund now. Edmund went on experimenting with the soul energy, trying to figure out different ways he can use it. But ultimately, his plan was to make a portal to the spirit realm. Edmund even dragged his brother Agnes into helping with these experiments. Even after all of Xavier's warnings, Edmund continued to do these experiments. This is when Xavier realizes he trusted the wrong guy with the wrong knowledge. When Agnes eventually found out what Edmund's true motives were, he was mad. Consequently, the fight ended with Edmund accidentally pushing both himself and Agnes into a portal to another dimension. It was in this portal that Agnes' soul was shattered and lost. Edmund ended up landing somewhere in Ohio in the 1800s. Fortunately, Edmund wasn't left with nothing. He had a little camcorder with him that somehow got transported through the portal as well. Edmund got the camcorder and put the last piece of Agnes' soul that he had left in it. Later on, Edmund ended up using the same small piece of his brother's soul to create a spider-like creature named the Collector. This may just be me, but I believe that the Collector isn't as well aware as Edmund's other creations because it only houses part of a soul and not the whole thing. But let's take a little detour and backtrack a bit. After a little while of being in this new timeline/dimension, Edmund pulled a New Year, New Me? Nah, New Timeline, New Me, and started going by the name Litho or Litho. It's however you want to pronounce it. You may be thinking that he gave up on his journey to achieve immortality since he's lost basically everything. You're wrong! This new timeline let light to a whole new world of possibilities for Litho. Soon, Litho began to use the people of this timeline as sort of puppets. The two most prominent puppets in the series are Sarah Covetman and Allison, I don't know his last name. It's probably safe to assume that at this point Litho has left behind his body and reduced down mostly to his soul because he is able to possess the people that he calls his puppets. Let's talk about Sarah, Litho's newest and most recent puppet. When Sarah was younger, she had these three bullies. They bullied her relentlessly because she came from the less wealthier part of town. One fateful day of Sarah's second grade year, these bullies had taken it a bit too far. They chased her into the woods, eventually cornering her at a cliff. Sarah pushed one of them off the cliff based off of survival instinct, but what she wouldn't know is that this fall would be fatal. The other two kids saw this happen, so she had no choice but to brutally murder them as well. She grew up tormented by the lives that her hands had taken all those years ago. Many years later, probably in high school, Sarah met Louis Bright and sometime later, Oliver Acrimony. Louis was very gifted in the creativity area, while Oliver was more talented on the robotics side of things. Their engineering teacher, Eric Gale, took note of this. The three were practically inseparable and sometime in the future founded the Dreamworld Entertainment Facility. Litho had already been attached to Sarah and using her as a puppet since childhood, but needed a new way to watch over her and the things she did. So he created a sister company called Watchful Eye Toys to keep a watchful eye over her. This company created things such as Twinblows as a more humane way to collect soul energy. The closer it got for the time to Dreamworld to open, Sarah got more distant from her friends. During the opening week of the facility, Sarah and Louis got into a fight, which basically ended up with Sarah murdering him. After his death, Sarah preserved Louis's body and put his soul into the Starlight animatronic. This would go on to be Litho's first successful experiment with essence and immortality. This murder would be followed closely by the death of Eric Gale, who died in a house fire. Though this fire was no mistake. Eric found out what Sarah/Litho did to Louis after a conversation with the Starlight animatronic. He went to Louis's house to retrieve some files to prove Sarah guilty, but this is when the house caught on fire. The firefighters didn't get there in time. Consequently, Eric died. He would go on to possess the Ribbon Dancer animatronic, though his soul got corrupted somehow. This made Ribbon Dancer a lot more eccentric than the other animatronics and also gave him severe memory loss. Next to die was Michael. He was a worker at the Dreamworld Entertainment Facility. He died by being crushed by a trash compactor and went on to possess the Rex animatronic. After Michael followed John, James, and Jake. They were just trying to find their way out of the facility when they got killed by Winnie, and soon became the triplets, Masquerade, Melody, and Mimic. Then Carly Gale, Eric's daughter. She was just trying to find her father, but unbeknownst to her, he was already dead. She was also murdered by Winnie and went on to possess Cheer. After Carly, there was Alyssa. Nobody really knows how she died, but some like to say she drowned. She went on to possess Glory, the sea serpent animatronic. Then there was Liz and Ben Acrimony, siblings of Oliver. Ben died by getting electrocuted by a special headset that Sarah had created. Then Liz followed soon after, murdered by Sarah. These two went on to possess the Lollipop animatronic. The last victim was Oliver Acrimony. He knew what Sarah did, and Sarah knew that he knew. One day he went to investigate in Sarah's office. An old CRT TV fell on his head, seriously injuring him. He's not actually dead, but I, personally, still consider him a victim. Though these people weren't dead, they were just souls detached from their bodies. Their bodies were preserved deep down in the basement of the Dreamworld facility. Then came Wyatt Nicholson, a new employee at the Dreamworld facility. He began working there because he was investigating the death of Louis Bright. These two actually had somewhat of a history together back in high school. After around 3 months of Wyatt working at the facility, a virus came over all the electronics, causing the building to collapse. Thankfully, Wyatt made it out alive. Wyatt got the virus out of all the infected animatronics, simultaneously finding out all the secrets of Dreamworld. Wyatt knew all along that Starlight was Louis, but didn't say anything until the virus was completely gone.